Starting off with our first one, and one that we will totally get through very quickly and without any disagreement. State election conversations. This comes by several sources. As we talked about last week, Tuesday was a big day for elections nationwide, especially in Idaho. Sadly, we can't view all of them, but here are the main ones. In particular, in Boise, the mayoral race. Incumbent Lauren McLean secured her position for another term, defeating former police chief Mike Masterson and the two other candidates, Joseph Evans and Aaron Reese. McLean led with a 55.4% of the vote, while Masterson had close but not enough, 43.4% of the vote. Evans and Reese received less than 1% of the total vote. As for the Boise City Council race, District 1 and 6, the elections were canceled for those because only one candidate registered in each district. As a result, incumbent Lucy Willits in District 1 and Jimmy Halliburton in District 6 won re-election. In District 3 in Southwest Boise, Kathy Corliss emerged victorious in a close race. Moving a little bit more easternly over in Mountain Home, for the Mountain Home mayoral election, a runoff was required as no candidate received a majority of the votes. And in Idaho Falls, the city council race, newcomer Kirk Larson won the council seat number 3, and incumbent John Radford won council seat number 5. All but to say, there were a lot of races happening all over the state, but these are the ones that I chose to pick and talk about. If you're curious about the results of the races, and there's one I didn't mention, there'll be links down in the podcast description doc that we have there for you to look at the state's election results site. With all of that said, me and John here, we were going to go open up the election results link that you guys will all have. And we were just going to kind of glance over them here and kind of commentate on them. John, are you surprised at all by what happened with the Boise mayoral race?
I don't know, man.
Thoughts?
I mean, I don't like McLean. I'm sad that she's going to be the governor again. But at the same time, I'm not surprised that Masterson didn't win. I mean, we talked about this last week. He had no positions. His position was, I'm not her.
His position was anti-position.
Right. And she wasn't.
She actually had answers for things, maybe answers that we as conservatives don't like, but at least she had answers and positions she stood on.
Yeah. Well, so the thing is it worked for Biden when he went up against Trump in a national election where, one, people care a lot more, and two, Trump was widely hated by Democrats. And so all you had to do was come out and say, I'm not him, and you would get all of the Democrats. And he was also hated by independents. And so you would get all of the Democrats and then all of the independents and even some of the Republicans. And so that's why it worked then. But as much as I don't like McLean's policies, I don't know how hated she is among independents. And so if she's not hated by independents, then, well, the fact that he won 43% of the vote, that looks like he won the Republican vote and she won the Democrats and independents.
Well, the tricky part, I mean, looking here just at the numbers to give people a little bit of context here when we're talking about this, because we're talking about percents, which percents are good. But looking at the total amount of actually what those percentages mean in numbers, Mike Masterson won 26,542 votes, rather than McLean won 33,926 votes in total. So 61,184 people voted in the Boise mayoral race.
That's a quarter of the population, 26%.
A quarter of the population there, which that is an argument to be said that there are certain people that maybe stood on the fences that independents weren't involved, and you're just seeing purely the politically involved and the not politically involved. I mean, if you're sitting here and you're saying, you know, the total amount of people that vote that he got 43, which that's not an ineffective campaign. If you're saying you got 43% of the vote compared to 55, that's not a runaway race, shall we say. So there's definitely people who don't like, you know, McLean, because Masterson, his whole campaign was anti-McLean. So if you're looking there and seeing those amount of votes, I would argue most of those are purely anti-McLean votes, which should be a little bit of a warning shot across the bow. So we'll see what goes on with that. And as we're talking about these, a good friend of mine mentioned that, and I haven't gone and cross-checked this, but he had an idea, which it might be true. I haven't cross-checked it, that you could look at most of the elections that were lost by conservatives and Democrats in the state, and you could see with a pretty high likelihood that the ones that were better funded, that had a greater amount of a war chest, shall we say, were the ones that actually won that election. Which, if that is the case, there again, I'm putting the asterisk. I haven't gone out and actually applied that theory and looked at it. If that's the case, then as conservatives, as Republicans, people who want to be involved in their state, part of that also needs to be voting with your dollar. That you can go vote at the polls, but if that's true, and please out there, go research that. And if I have some extra time, we will do that and talk about it next week. That vote with your dollars, vote with your money, or with your time if you can help these different candidates or different things in races that you care about, be it Republican, be it Democrat, be it Libertarian or whatever, that you don't just vote, but you give them other resources to help them in their election, because it goes a long, long way.
Well, and that's the biggest difference, I think, right now between the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, because the Democrats have courted the activist type person. Republicans don't really feel strongly about anything. We're more just kind of a to stay off my lawn and leave me alone kind of group. I remember having a conversation with my wife a long time ago, and she got kind of upset with me because it was with regards to school choice and looking at that and the bill as written, and the homeschool Idaho groups were saying, this is a bad bill. We need to vote against it. And I said, well, that's great, but our schools are failing and we need to solve the problem somehow. And so if your only solution is don't change, well, you're going to lose, because clearly something needs to change. And the only people that are presenting a solution are the people that are typically on the left saying, well, this is clearly broken, so here's a solution. Let's go with this. And the people who are on the right say, yeah, but don't change anything. And the don't change anything crowd, that you're going to lose. It's going to happen. And so that's where my statement, when I learned that Masterson didn't win, it's like, well, yeah, because he wasn't for anything. He wasn't giving a way forward. We clearly have problems. We have problems with housing. We have problems with homelessness. We have problems with some drug nonsense. We have problems with our schools. We have problems in the state of Idaho. And if your platform is I'm not her, well, you're not proposing solutions. You're not trying to solve problems. You're just trying to keep all the problems the way they are. And that's a losing strategy.
That's a politically losing strategy. Politically, with politics, you're trying to take eternal principles and apply them to current problems and issues. And so if you're not actually applying those principles and they're coming up with solutions, right, actual positions that you're holding on things, well, then why are you even running for office? And I mean, you can see that there's this changing in the Republican Party, I think, and there's a bit of tearing happening at the same time. That there is I want to say old, but it's really not the traditional old, but it's what has been since I think about the 90s I've heard and read about, maybe about the 80s of the Republican Party, the Conservative Party, which is this kind of libertarian mindset that, we build the space for people to be in, but we don't tell them what to do in the space type of mindset, right? Just cut taxes, make things affordable, but don't deal on social issues. We're all about the economics. Man is an economic person. Rather than the more traditional, I would argue, conservative stance and the Republican stance, if you look back, at the founding with Lincoln and that really big break for the Republican Party there. And also just in general with current trends with Trump and DeSantis and Vivek and others kind of leading that pack in the party, is an idea of no, that we believe there are objective truths. And if there are such a thing as objective truths, and we believe that we are also rational human beings made in the image of a creator, then we can understand those objective truths. Are we going to get it right all the time? No way. That's not going to happen. But that doesn't mean that we don't then try to discover those eternal truths, those objective truths, right? And then apply those to policies with solutions and do things.
Yeah. Yeah. But if you don't stand for something, if you're not trying to solve problems, then all you're doing is holding up someone else from solving problems.
Agreed. But with that said, that is our 2 cents on the Boise mayoral race. But just glancing over these, there was a bit of a close race for District 3 seat for the Boise City Council with Kathy Corliss and Josh Johnson. Josh Johnson got 32.68%. And as we talked about earlier, Kathy Corliss, she got 32.7%.
So that one, I believe he is actually asking for a recount.
Oh, because it's that close?
Because it's that close. They're separated by next to nothing.
Yeah, and you're talking decimals there.
Yeah, so he lost by 15, which is, I'm trying to look it up if this article has it real quick. If the margin between the winner and loser is less than or equal to 0.1%, then it goes for an automatic recount. But this 15 votes is 0.19%, which means that the person requesting the recount has to pay for the recount. And it's $100 per precinct. There are 15 precincts. He would have to spend $1,500 to go recount the entire district. But also we're talking 15 votes. Like, they might find that someone made clerical errors for 15 votes. His statements make sense. He's not saying that anybody did anything wrong. He's just saying, hey, that's really close. We should double check that because it's really close and I might win.
Which is kind of, it's a big deal. Also, when quoting an article here, I think KTVB7 said this, or maybe it was the Boise Dev, but as it stands right now, all the people, unless this gets changed, that won Boise City Council seats were people that were endorsed by McLean. So unless this changes, she's going to have full control of the city council in that sense.
Yep, it's going to be awesome. He would be the lone non-McLean person on the city council.
Which could make for some really interesting news if we're looking through the lens of this podcast.
Yeah, but I don't know how much I like that.
Yeah, you take what you get. But that'll be something interesting to watch and see what's going on there. But thank you for catching that, John. I was not aware of that going on.
Well, that was something my wife actually brought up to me earlier tonight. She had caught wind of that and thought it was interesting, which it very much is.
Well, now more people know because we can put it on the podcast. Everyone can hear it.
There you go.
Hopefully it'll travel a little further.
That's right.
Also, I know the Eagle mayoral race is, if I remember correctly, going to go into a runoff because two front contenders are 35% and 31%. And then there's another person that's like 26%. And for the person to win the Eagle mayor, it has to be at least 50% of the total vote, which no one has. So that's going to go into a runoff from what I hear. Garden City also had a very close race for one of its city council seats there. James Page was 35.5% of the vote. Then behind him, Kent Rasmussen, I'm guessing. We got 34.64% of the vote. I'm guessing with that, since it's not a mayoral race, it's not going to be quite as tight. Kuna really exploded there with Joe Steer getting 57.39% of the vote. So that was not close at all. I'm reading a couple close races, but most of them were just blowouts. Star Mayor. That is crazy. Trevor A. Chadwick got 34.99% of the total vote of the mayoral race there. And then the Ada County Jail Bond. It needed 67.7% in favor for the vote to pass. There were 34.16% of total amount of people that were against it. 65.84% were in favor, so it was 1%-ish short of having enough votes to pass for that bond to get applied for the Ada County Jail, which would have been a bond issuing for $49 million for the purpose of helping with the jail and more space for inmates there.
And I don't know how I feel about that. I think
I've heard different sides of the argument. I'm on the fence as well.
Right. So I voted against it. And my reasoning was this, is that if every time we need to upgrade something or change something, we do a ballot measure and we say, but it's only going to increase your taxes by $10 a year or $10 or whatever, some small incremental amount, well, that's great. But you do enough small incremental amounts and it becomes a big amount and quickly. And so I don't know. I feel like there's got to be other solutions. But then again, I don't know. It's a tough one.
Yeah, I mean, you've got taxes to do it. I do admit I was reading in a book, here again, my love for reading, that it was talking about in the past that cities, what they would do is that they would publicly say, almost like an old-fashioned way of doing a GoFundMe, honestly. It's kind of funny to say it that way, but basically, where like the state would say, hey, this is the threshold we need for this new road, right? Say it's a road or freeway at the time, or maybe sawmill or whatever you want to say in the 18th century, right? And then they would say, once we reach that dollar amount, then we will start work on it. But we can't until we start on that. And then people basically would buy/give the state money for that project, kind of like a GoFundMe, until the quantity or the amount got great enough. And then they could do the project. But people voted with their money if they actually wanted the project to be done. And if it never reached enough in the total funding from the public, from private funds, then it didn't happen.
I mean, that makes sense to me. I mean, isn't that what bonds are, where you offer them for sale and people buy them for a return?
It's kind of a long lost thing that you hear about it a lot. Also in like World War II, like, people, buy bonds to help the war or whatever. And I think it's something, especially my generation, I've had to learn it, where like it's something that you knew, war bonds or whatever, something that you read about in history, but you never understood like, wait, what does that mean? What does that do type of situation? I've heard arguments both sides for the jail bond, saying that, the jail, it hasn't, I think, had an official full-on upgrade since 1990 something.
Yeah, we did a story on that a couple of weeks ago. And it's been a minute since that thing's been upgraded.
So it's not like they're trying to get money for something that's already nice and shiny. It does need a little bit of help, especially with the population growth we've had in Ada County lately. But how to raise those funds, how to allocate those funds, that can be a different matter entirely. With that said, we are going to need to move on here. I'd love to cover more stuff, but we just kind of did Ada County here because we're also running a little short on time, so we'll move on to our next story here.